Hi, Steve.
Hello.
Thank you so much for accepting to be interviewed by us of VEROROCK. First of all, how are you and how's the European tour going?
Been very, very good. We played last night in, where was it?
Carcassonne, Pistoia.
Pistoia, that's right.
Pistoia.
We'll start again.
Huge crowd in Pistoia.
It was very, very good. It was very good. The shows start later than they do in the UK. So 9:30, and then of course you get to bed a little bit late. So I didn't get quite as much sleep as I would normally do. We were still awake at 4:30 in the morning, going. It was kind of crazy night, but
okay.
So yeah, tours are very exciting, and big crowds and little sleep.
Okay, so a question regarding your new album.
Yes.
The follow-up to Surrender of Silence
Yes.
will be a concept album. Can you tell us what inspired the music and the lyrics? And does the album have a title? And when will it be released?
Right. Well, it's always unlucky to say it's going to be called this and it's released this time, etc. Because only yesterday we were having the conversation that to make it good, because we're doing so many shows, it's very hard to finish it because my touring schedule is very, very tight. I start recording when we get back. We do have a working title. We do have a working concept. I can't say. It will be released sometime next year.
Next year.
Next year, yeah. Well, it depends whether I finish early or not. It all depends on the sessions that I have with Roger King and with availability of musicians. All the practical things that the dream is one thing. The practical thing is something else. All I can say is that I absolutely love it. I adore it. It's
what inspired the music
multifaceted. Well, again, conversations with Jo, my lovely wife Jo. We write together, and we come up with ideas together, and she pushes me in a good way, I think, to not repeat myself, but to do something new each time. And so when we were in lockdown doing various things, with Surrender of Silence, Under a Mediterranean Sky, a live album, finishing that, and a book. All of these things, were very much what we come up with together. We subject ourselves to these extraordinary schedules, but it's all I can say is it's a very good album, and it's revealing itself bit by bit.
Okay, but which innovative elements did you introduce in this album?
Well, as I say, it's work in progress. So all I can say is that the approach is slightly different. I think because it's a story, I'm approaching it like orchestrating a film. I think you come up with different music if you have a story or a concept, because you're doing program music for something. I want it to be inclusive, of course, and permissive, and all these alternatives to the word progressive. I think it will have all the elements of what I hope will be a great album.
Okay. You began playing harmonica around the age of 2 and guitar around the age of 12, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Why are these two instruments your favorite? What makes them so special to you?
Well, I think that they are very... so start with the harmonica. The harmonica, I was talking to a guy who did the words, the libretto for a very famous musical in London, Les Miserables, and he was saying, Herbert Kretzmer, and he said he thought the harmonica was a wonderfully versatile little instrument. It's because it doesn't sound the same if a child is playing it or if Bob Dylan is playing it. It doesn't sound the same as if Larry Adler was playing it, or Toots Thielemans, or Stevie Wonder, or all of the extraordinary blues players, and there have been so many of them. It's a single line instrument, of course.
Okay.
But you have this thing where you can play in one key, but if you have the chromatic things, it can play in all keys because you have the ability to change key with the button on the end of it. But it's the blues harmonica that is the one that I think is, although there aren't so many notes, the amount of expression you can get into one note, you can get vibrato and wah with the hand, and then if you amplify it, it can sound like a trumpet, like a guitar, like all sorts of things.
Instrument, yeah.
And it's the instrument I grew up with, you see, and I was playing show tunes on it and everything, and folk music and all that. And then when I was listening to the Rolling Stones for the first time, I thought, I didn't realize what I was hearing was blues, but I thought, yeah, I can do that too. And I learned to bend notes and do all that, that kind of stuff. So very expressive little instrument.
Okay.
The guitar was, I bought guitar records from a very early age. In the late 1950s and the early 1960s, guitars all sounded like cowboy tunes or like spy themes, and you just had the guitar sounding twang, you know, it sounded a little bit like the James Bond theme, or like Bonanza. And then guitars started to emulate the human voice. They started to sound like, again, like other things. They learned to sustain and scream, and I think in the hands of the blues players like Muddy Waters, and other players, you know, it started to evolve and it became something else. So I think
they are both very expressive instruments.
Yes. So it started to change. Before you had synthesizers really, you know, being out there, the guitar was doing that. You know, it was
a forerunner.
It was a forerunner, and also I think, you know, the electric guitar and the acoustic guitar. The acoustic guitar, classical guitar, is a bit like the guitarist's answer to the piano. It has a wide dynamic. It can do many different things. It's another instrument entirely, and I fell in love with both aspects of it.
Guitar Noir and Darktown are considered by many two Hackett milestones, especially the first one, Guitar Noir. How important were these two albums for your career?
Well, I think they were done during a time when the music business was in transition, I think, from the idea of people having hit singles to the idea of perhaps returning to a style that was recognizable for fans, and not worrying about competing in the marketplace, but just being true to yourself. So it was a kind of return to that.
Roots. Return to the roots. To your musical roots.
I think, yes, I think so. A return to being or sounding more like yourself.
Okay.
You know, I think, you know, the idea of commercial music is very much an oversubscribed club. A lot of people are trying to have commercial hits, and as a result, all sounding very, very similar. So I tried to avoid that.
You recently celebrated both Genesis and your solo albums. 2024 will mark the 50th anniversary of the Lambla's Dano Broadway.
Yes.
An iconic yet controversial album.
Yes.
Will you somehow celebrate it? And is there a chance to see it performed in its entirety? If not, why?
Well, I think that it is an iconic album. My thoughts are that I will celebrate it in my own way.
Okay.
As far as I'm concerned, I think the answer is to celebrate the tracks that I feel
more guitar oriented.
Perhaps more guitar oriented, but also the tracks where I think they survive intact within themselves, rather than in the overall, because you know that Genesis did the entire show, and then the Musical Box did the entire show with the original stuff, and I know that most diehard fans and completists have seen all of that. So I have to walk the line between slavishly, being a curator in the museum of my own making, wearing my curator's hat. I think that there's a lot of good stuff in there with the Lamb. There's some beautiful tracks. I love certain things like Chamber of 32 Doors, Fly on a Windshield.
The Lamia.
I think Lamia is a very good track, and I think the title track is very good. There are some others that were tracks that we were performing even before the Lamb. You know, Lily White Lilith was called The Light before that, and it had a lyric from Phil Collins, and then it got adapted, blah, 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 blah. So there are other things in there, and there are some things that are on the extreme as well. I can see tracks that are in there that were influential for other bands, and it's a case of, do you intend to do those or not?
Okay. What's the spirit behind both Genesis Revisited projects? And is there a substantial difference between Genesis Revisited 1 and 2?
Well, I think that originally I had a conversation with Julian Colbeck when we had just recorded what became a live album as an acoustic duo in Sicily and in Palermo, and he had worked with guys from Yes, and we were having this conversation about Steve Howe, who I worked with Yes, and he said that he thought that Yes fans regarded Steve Howe as the heart of Yes, and he said, very flatteringly, he said, I suspect that Genesis fans think of you in the same way with Genesis. And this sparked off a whole conversation where we talked about doing Genesis Revisited. I think the title was even his. He said Genesis Revisited, and he said, perhaps we should do this as a live thing. It's and then along the way we were talking about the best way to relearn or to teach people this stuff would be to do a studio album. And I had an idea of doing an expanded version of Genesis to involve orchestra, to involve the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra, and to involve friends from bands that had a similar history, where there was crossover between, especially the guys from King Crimson, my friends from that band, and there've been a lot of crossover with Genesis and King Crimson and Yes, and I've been involved with all of that right back in the days when I was working on the album of Peter Banks. With Jan Ackerman, John Wetton, Phil Collins, way back, 1971, 72, we were doing that. So there was a natural sort of crossover.
Okay.
I didn't want to do it where the difficulty is always for fans. They would say, "Oh, I would like to see you working with Peter Gabriel, or I'd like to see you working with Phil Collins again." And then and why can't you put back the original team? And I felt that the important thing was that the music survived, and that the team be flexible. So if this classic rock was going to become the classical music of the future, as
maybe in a slightly different form.
Yes.
Yeah.
My friend Richie Havens was saying, the stuff that we did on Please Don't Touch, he said, this is the classical music of the future. And I thought, wow, this, you can think of it in that way, but then it's a case of the classical music that we regard from the 1800s. We can't have Tchaikovsky does Tchaikovsky. We can't have that. That can't happen. But and in the same way, you can't put together the original team. It's not going to happen. There are the live albums, of course.
Okay. You just mentioned orchestra.
Yes.
Did you enjoy playing with orchestras and choir recently? Were you satisfied by the sonic outcome, or were there at times any redundancies between the band and the orchestra?
Oh no, I don't think there were any redundancies. I worked with the Heart of England Orchestra in the UK some years ago, and we did a live thing at the Royal Festival Hall, and we did a tour of the UK, and everything was sold out, and it was really great and fantastic.
What about this latest? With
and the latest one we did in Wuppertal.
Yeah.
Essentially, we did the same set, but this was different. We had a choir as well.
Yeah.
And it was extraordinary, really. There were a number of things that went on in our personal lives, not just me. It seemed as if something was dogging our footsteps. My wife Jo broke her hand, and then shortly, and she had an operation on it, and shortly after that, at the end of one rehearsal, I fell over and I infected my hand, and it was very, very difficult to play, particularly nylon guitar. Yeah. So I knew this was coming up, and I was playing with a bandage on it, and I was having to apologize to the audience that I'm sorry I can't play certain things. So that was a challenge. And then Amanda Lehman, after the first show, she lost her voice and she couldn't sing. She had some kind of infection. And then shortly after that, on the same tour, Rob Townsend had an accident, and he fell, and he had to have stitches in his mouth, and he wasn't able to play several shows, and it felt as if we were jinxed, as if something was following us around, and we were thinking, what happens next? So all this was going on at this time. However, the shows were very good with the orchestra. We were all very nervous because we didn't know what was going to work.
What happened next?
And I knew that I had to lead the charge, and there I was, a wounded soldier.
Everything went well.
Everything went well. So I think that the third night was the best, because in the end, I was tired of being nervous and this thing with my hand and everything, and I just said to the crowd, "We forget about getting the notes right tonight. There's been too much pressure with that. We're just going to have a party with everybody," and it went absolutely wonderfully well.
Okay.
But as I say, Amanda could only sing on the first night, but she joined as an instrumentalist.
Okay.
On the thing. So I think that third show was great. It was quite something. I think it was wonderful. They were a wonderful orchestra.
Okay. How and when did the idea of the fantastic Supper's Ready long guitar improvisation come together?
Well, I think that I remember Peter Gabriel saying something about his take with Supper's Ready live. He said he felt that he was singing for his life at the end of it. So it was obviously very emotional for him, and I felt that playing guitar but not singing, you know, my version of the voice on that is what the guitar does.
Okay.
On record, it's a fade out, fairly quick, but there's a lot of guitars playing. I multi-track the guitars in harmony and tapping and various things at the end. So I felt I had to deliver something with the guitar, and every night we do it, it's slightly different. Yeah. I also like playing the guitar up the octave with one of my pedals that can play very, very high. So okay. It's getting a little shorter towards the end because it can be long. If you like it being long, yes. Maybe the band finishes before I do. You know, they're thinking,
oh, they're waiting for you.
Yeah, waiting for me. Yeah, time's up.
You mentioned your band.
Yes.
Your present band has never performed as brilliantly as now. What are the key factors of this harmony and tightness on stage?
Well, I have to say, I think it's. I have worked with many wonderful musicians and singers. I've been very, very lucky. But I think this is the best live band I've ever had. And it was Nick Beggs who said that first of all. He said, this is the best band you've ever had. That's very generous of him, because he wasn't involved in that, playing bass. But I think the following. I think I have the best players of all the bands, and
so technically you think it's the best?
Yeah, I think that's what's most attractive about this, is that the team is absolutely right. Whether they're playing my stuff or Genesis stuff, whether it's nostalgic or groundbreaking, they are a wonderful band. So it is the same band that is on Surrender of Silence and on other stuff, and I was really thrilled, with the production sounds, and
we are happy about that.
Yeah, I think it's an incredible team. That's why I think of it as a band. It's very hard not to think of it as a band. I know I'm supposed to be the presiding ringmaster or whatever, but because so much of this comes from band sensibility. It's what an incredible band could do when they all get together. They blow me away every night, these guys.
Now, something about you. You have more than 50 years of a successful career behind you. What are your biggest achievements and your biggest regrets, if any?
Biggest achievements? Oh my goodness. Well, I think it was a friend of mine, my friend Steve Tobin, who made films, made commercials. And we were friends very early on in the 1960s. And we used to compare notes. And he said, it's a funny thing, but achievements seem so little in retrospect. When you're looking back, it doesn't seem like you've achieved very much, because you're looking forward to, what can I do next? Could I do it better next time? Okay. So I tell you one thing I'm very pleased about is that I stuck with the nylon guitar, the acoustic guitar, because that wasn't popular in rock when I started playing nylon guitar with Genesis. And that started a little bit in 1973. There was more of it in 1974. And each year, progressively, whether it was in the band or on my own, I was doing that. And then I noticed that nylon guitar started to creep into the work of a little bit with Madonna and a little bit with Sting. And I thought, this thing that shouldn't really work with rock and roll is being accepted, you know.
Has
Somewhere
inspired
along the
many.
line,
Yeah.
I have to say,
And regrets? What about your regrets?
regrets, oh my God. My only regret is that I wasn't with Jo much earlier in life.
Wow.
And that if I could have met her when she was just legal, and I was already a young roue, this would have been great. And then
it seems a coincidence, but this introduces me to the next question.
Yes.
You and your wife have known each other since for a long time,
Yes.
and you're happily married since 2011.
Yes.
What is the secret behind your relationship, and how does this strong bond affect your songwriting?
Well, I think it's because I'm a swine and she's an angel. This is how it works. So, they both need each other.
Complement each other.
I'm joking, but I think Jo is very sweet, very patient, very imaginative, very socially aware. She wants the whole world to do well. She cares about everybody, not just me.
And it seems she's the real driving force behind your creativity, your energy, vitality.
Absolutely, she's at the center of everything. I'm very lucky to have met her, and I'm in later life now, and she puts up with my tantrums and my moods and all the things that people don't see when I'm frustrated in the middle of the night when I can't sleep and I'm climbing the walls. And I'm always amazed she's there, we love each other, and there's a lot of forgiveness that comes into that. So she's the sweetest person I have ever known, and I'm sorry if that makes every other man on the planet jealous. But we can't all have
everything.
We can't all have everything all at once.
Okay, Steve.
And I adore her, and she's sitting there now.
Wow. A couple of questions about Genesis, and then the interview is over. What was your contribution to the growth of Genesis, both musically and visually? Briefly.
Well, my contribution to the band, I'm always asking myself this question, and sometimes I think some days I think I contributed a lot, other days I think I contributed very little. To be honest, I think, and I'm trying to be very honest, it was Phil Collins who said, we're bound to influence each other. And I'd never been in a band that was working and doing shows and making albums, so I'd never really worked in a group, and I didn't know what he meant. Now, of course, I know exactly what he meant. Yes, of course.
Okay.
So, without him, there wouldn't have been Genesis. Without all of us, there wouldn't have been the Genesis that you...
Fantastic chemistry between 5 people.
Great chemistry, and it's unusual to have a band of 5 writers. Very unusual, but they're all great writers. And so this meant, I think, for an elevated standard, and I think we were all, very lucky to find each other. So
wow.
I hope that explains some of it.
Where lies the beauty of Foxtrot? You are bringing Foxtrot on stage.
Yes.
And can it be considered the real turning point for Genesis' popularity?
Well, I'm told it was a #1 album in Italy. Foxtrot, when I look back to it, because I'm trying to answer your other question as well, about the visual side of Genesis. So altogether, I think some of the songs that we performed with Nursery Crime, we performed in front of audiences who didn't always understand it, and we hadn't really got the audience like this. By the time we were doing Foxtrot, we had a light show I was always interested in the presentation and having a light show, and so I'm always saying that I wanted to get Genesis to have a mellotron and a light show, and to expand the keyboard setup so that, you know, in those days, if you wanted a particular keyboard sound, you had to have another keyboard.
So your contribution was aimed at expanding the sonic perspectives.
Yeah, I think that's a very good way of putting it, and also visually, because I think if you present complicated music in an engaging way physically, then you can make everything seem simple. In other words, people are watching a story with each song, none more so than with the opening, which is, you know, Watch of the Skies. I remember when we were still writing the song, and we were at sound checks trying it out. We were playing big places at Palace Sports, and we weren't big in the rest of the world, but
in Italy,
I remember it sounded fantastic when you heard the mellotron start up in these big places. So I think for the Italians, they always saw it as, it's classical in style, it sounds like an orchestra. Aliens. It's aliens.
A team of aliens.
A team of aliens, and it's a science fiction story.
Yeah.
And of course with Peter Gabriel, when he is in silhouette looking like an alien, where you couldn't see on stage. You know, that tableau at the beginning where you had black light, sometimes dry ice, sometimes smoke, the lighting trees, the Muslim backdrop, the glow of that, aliens. Yes, so suddenly you're confronted with a team of aliens, and my perception of that album has changed over time. I think when you take the best of Foxtrot, which is a gorgeous album, and the best of Selling England by the Pound, this for me seems like a golden period of Genesis.
It does. It does.
Yeah, for you. And you know, you have that thing. It's many different styles of music, something syncopated, something classical, many genres, many styles, pan-genre, a sense of story, the Homeric journey through Greek literature and the spoken word, the bardic stuff, the poetry of the lyrics, wonderful lyrics to the first track, Water of the Skies. Even if you don't know what it means, the ambiguity of that, somehow, you know, it was groundbreaking. And then I love doing live what couldn't be done then, to be able to do Horizons, to be able to do Can Utility and the Coastliners, to be able to do the album in its entirety without any introduction to anything. People know we're going to do that, and to take it to its spiritual home, which is here in Italy, where it was first embraced and understood. So,
and well accepted.
And well accepted. So it's a joy to bring it here.
Time is running out. Just a couple of questions.
Sure.
The positive aspects, both from a musical and personal point of view, of being part of Genesis.
The positive aspects. Well, my God. I think, well, we learned from each other, and I think we still do, even if we pretend we don't listen to each other. Everybody does. Yes. And
what is the other guy doing?
To compliment each other privately and to compete with each other publicly. It's a crazy thing. the positive aspects far outweigh the negative aspects, of course. So, you know, a fantastic band, and it's important for me that the early work, which was celebrated by none other than John Lennon, who said he considered Genesis to be true sons of the Beatles, and this was from nursery rhyme onwards, is the biggest compliment. That every time I think to myself, hey, you know, maybe you know, think, no, hang on a minute. Even with a little song reminding me, like, of one of the first things that I wrote with Phil Collins, where it was For Absent Friends, I know that we had Eleanor Rigby in mind because we were thinking of the English and the idea of writing a song of compassion about people who were of a certain age, two old ladies instead of one old lady whose passing was celebrated in one song. The Beatles' amazing Eleanor Rigby, of course, you know. So, but Lennon picked up on that, you know, and I think, God, isn't that wonderful? You know that
it is
that's possible. So whatever anyone says, you can dismiss it, but you can't dismiss
what
that.
Said.
It's a bit like Shakespeare saying, "Yeah, I like your play, man. Yeah, okay, okay. Let's keep it coming."
One adjective to define 7 people: Peter Gabriel, Phil Collins, Tony Banks, Mike Rutherford, Anthony Phillips, Ray Wilson, Richard McPhail. Each of them, one adjective to define them. Peter Gabriel, visionary. I suggest.
Let me come up with one word for all of them. They're all individually brilliant.
Okay.
So I wouldn't say, you know, what separates them. I'd say, you know, what unifies everybody is brilliance, and you know, everyone at best, a tremendous amount of compassion, I think.
Okay.
You know.
Last question, and the interview sadly is over.
Yeah.
You claim, you know, your autobiography, you attended a Genesis gig.
Yes.
On the Duke tour. Where
Yes.
was it, and how was your experience as a concert viewer? What impressed you the most?
Well, I always wanted to push Genesis towards doing a spectacular live show.
Okay.
And for the first time I was able to be, and I've dreamt this sort of thing many times subsequently, it's like being on stage and off stage at the same time. 50% of the material they were doing at that time was stuff that we did and that we wrote together. So it was so powerful for me, I couldn't sleep all night afterwards.
Was it in London?
Yes, it was in London. It was at
May
Hammersmith. I can't remember the exact date.
No, I think it wasn't Hammersmith. It was a little venue.
No, it was definitely Hammersmith.
Oh, it was Hammersmith. Okay.
Yes.
Duke tour. Okay.
It was definitely Hammersmith.
So they impressed you.
It was very impressive. It was very good. There was only one criticism. Everyone was amazing, but the guitar was too quiet. And I thought, why is the guitar too quiet? You know, once again, why is there a diminished?
Is not there anymore.
Why? No. Why is the guitar diminished? It should be louder in the mix, and apart from that, I thought that the standard of it was so high. Everyone was amazing on stage.
Okay.
Everyone was, yes, I couldn't sleep afterwards because I realized that it was job done. The dream had been completed. But at the same time, I knew that I did the right thing because
you already had a great career up to that point.
Well,
you already released the Defector.
Sometimes you have to be unpopular to be popular, and that's something that that you've got to make a sacrifice in a way in order to make something else. So I think I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today, which is, if I may say so proudly, doing new albums of if I can say this, work that I love to the same degree that I did with Genesis, imbue it with as much feeling as that, and at the same time bring back the dream that was Genesis and try and expand upon it, and not just do it with a band and a light show, but also sometimes with an orchestra, with special guests to take it on, and the evolution of that to include woodwinds and brass and jazz players and people who are capable of taking it to the next level. All of that, I think, is job well done, and I'm still working on it. So the cathedral is still being built out of matchsticks, and we hope that it doesn't get blown over by a sharp wind.
Steve,
Thank you.
thank you so much for
Thank you.
being with us, and see you next time.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.